Good morning, lecturer, and hello, our classmate. So we are from Group 4. Today we're going to present you about the comparison and contrast, political attitude and behavior between Germany and Japan. And here is our group members. So here is the table of contents for our group presentation. So here is the first content. So I will be presenting about the political interest and identity. The political interest is a motivational foundation that spurs political engagement and action. Hence, politically speaking, interest is something that experience and can subsequently lead to engagement in the political system. For Germany, the political identity of Germany is complicated by the legacies of late unification between the East and the West Germany, as well as the rise of fascism within the country. National perception on nationalism and patriotism were dangerous and unacceptable for Germany because extremism had led Germany to go to war with other Western power for the purpose of expansionism. The German collective identity after the unification is known as its engagement in the international politics far beyond Europe. However, if we take a look at Japan, the Japanese political identity is an effort to address new realities, as Japan nowadays is the country that gained international influence on global politics. The international politics, Japan's identity is constituted by domestic norms and culture, and as a constitutive of interest, which in turn cause the behavior in Japan. So Japan has commonly been described as the identity of an economic great power as well. And according to the norm constructivist theory, they argue that the identity matters primarily as a determinant of national interest, which they in turn believe to function as a source of foreign and security policy. So after we get to know about the political identity between these two countries, we are now moving on to the other subsection is about the political culture. So political culture is referred to the subjective orientation to politics, or it means by the set of attitudes, belief about politics in a nation at a given time. The concept of political culture is associated with a basic assumption that cultural factors determine the action of the state and consequently have an indirect impact on the political structure. So first of all, we will take a look about Germany. German political culture stress upon greater pride in country's economic achievements. One dramatic shift in Germany's political culture was the rise in post-materialist values. So this referred to political participation, feminism, as well as the environment. And moreover, there was also a decline in materialist concerns such as economic growth, jobs, and order as well. In 1973, only 13% of Germans feel that post-materialist concerns were a priority. So post-materialist values has become more pronounced in all advanced democracies, but they are far strongest in Germany, which can explain why Germany has had one of the world's most successful green politics. So on the other side, for Japan's political culture, is focused on historical experiences with Confucianism, feudalism, militarism, and bureaucratism. They certainly shape the norms and values that guide Japanese political behavior. In efforts to attribute political behavior to culture, scholars often point out to the group conformity and social hierarchy that fill in most of the aspects of Japanese life. And Japanese make decisions through consensus. Besides this, political factions are more often based on seniority and personal like patron-client relationships rather than on values. So all in all, here is the analysis between the identity and culture for both Germany and Japan. So German identity remains uncertain and unclear. At one level, the country emerged from the Cold War unified and with a strong belief in the importance of democracy, peace, and international institutions, while Japan's identity is evolving from aggressive military to a peace-loving nation. So having been guided by the Yoshida Doctrine, Japan dedicates its resources to economic development and to contribute to international peace and stability. So that is all about the first section, and I would like to give the floor to Penny to continue our next content. Thank you.
So thank you, TV. So I will be talking about political efficacy as well as political trust. But to start off, we'll start with political efficacy. So political efficacy refers to the citizens' trust of which the people believe that they can make a difference and changes to the government, as well as to the society through participation. So we will now look at the political efficacy in Germany, and there the form of efficacy generally is included of voting, campaigning, peaceful protest, as well as aggressive behavior. As changes and differences can be achieved through the active people, Germans' participation in political behavior can also be influenced by different factors as well. And in other words, it means that the system and behavior of the efficacies are deeply related to their knowledge of political issues as well as the type of political issues that are required for them to participate in. So, for example, for those who are aware of political affairs are more likely to vote than those who are not. Um, and other than that, it also plays a big role in Germany, in which it influences the behavior and the participation of people. So, yes, we'll now look at political efficacy in Japan. In Japan, unlike the Western world, Japan's internal efficacy is usually in low occurrences, as people are more aware of political change along with their responsibilities. But despite that, their political knowledge and political interests are also very prominent, and it shows the attitudes of the Japanese as well. And with those characteristics, the Japanese people can also consider their acts to be an efficacy through uh, the social assistance or social involvement as well. So the government of Japan has always been responsible and very responsive to the issues within the country, and in turns, this gains the trust of their people, which is shown that there is less aggressive behavior in Japan and more of um, smaller factors that contribute to the changes and differences in the country. So, as an analysis, we can say that both countries' political efficacy proves that the government and the people have different relationships with one another. So, while Germany has a more outspoken nature and more participations in terms of uprisings or changes, Japan has a more subtle approach to each issues or matters in the society, and their actions often root from the smaller causes such as projects or social service or involvement, and they have more insight, and that gives them the reason to have more insight on trying to make a difference and positive transitions inside their society. So now that we know about the political efficacy within the two countries, we'll look at the political trust. And political trust means that if a citizen have belief in and confidence in the government that they are responsible or work well with different institutions, then the government itself is legitimate and it promotes the wellness of states to democracy. Typically, put their trust in the government's problem-solving skills, but not so much in regards of their federal coalition government, because the government's decisions are not made with the involvement of the parliamentary, but more so on the cross-party consensus and short-term consensus as well. So the people believe that a lot of crises that come and go are usually overwhelming, as there's not much that involves the parliamentary. However, because of the short-term consensus among the parties, they're still able to manage several issues and factors that help the country as a whole. And for Japan, on the other hand, they have a high level of political trust, um, as they believe that their governments perform well in management of the national economy as well as political representation of elected officials. However, there is still skepticism among the bureaucrats, as they believe that despite uh, the idea or ideology that they practice, it still would change in the future. And overall, because there is a respect for the authority as seen in the confusion elements, they're still likely to abide by the rules. And most importantly, we have seen that Japan has this value of being very responsible for their issues or matters at hand. So they do follow the legal demonstrations that are deemed to be responsible and righteous. So to look at it at a bigger picture, we can conclude to an analysis in where the countries all have their own views of the governments and institutions. And for Germany, they focus more on the approach to the problem solving, while the elites less of the government, as their faith in the federal coalition usually do not meet the expectation of the people. On the other hand, it abides by the rules and regulations that are set by the government. Despite some doubts, there is still a lot of faith regarding the political governance as well as the social government. And that is all for my part. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to my teammate Mimi to present the next part.
Thank you, Panit, for the floor. And now I would like to continue to talk about the political interest, knowledge, and participations in Germany and Japan. But before we getting to know the context, we have to understand the term first. The political knowledge is the range of factual informations about politic and is stood in long-term memory. It can be knowledge about politic, and it is presumed to enable and encourage people to participate in politics. And when we talk about political participations, we refer to activity that undertake voluntarily by citizens to influence authoritarian or generally binding regulation and decision related to political system. Also, according to the contemporary wisdom, political knowledge stimulate political interest and promote political participations. In regards to the political interest in Germany, there was a survey that reported that more than half of all Germans were interested in politics, and over and a half signed petitions. Over a third of them had attended lawful demonstrations, and almost 10% had joined some type of boycott activity. For instance, a survey research has shown that Germany has the second highest level of protest activity in Western Europe, and the vibrancy of Germany's civil society was on display in 2016 as both supporter and opponent of the massive influx of Syrian refugees took the street to protest about Germany open door migration policy, which you can see in the picture. However, there is still a knowledge gap between the East and West Germany, in which former citizens of East Germany still show lower levels of support for democratic institutions compared with the West Germans. In regard to their political interest, the Japanese Journal of Political Science found out that younger Japanese, closer to the experience of formal educations, have a better understanding of institutions and possess the cognitive ability to reconcile complex policy matter, while older Japanese are likely to have a better knowledge of historical events and leader. And for the analysis, we derive information from a case study of competitive politics book, which stated that political attitude and value are formed from people's sense of identity, which is built around the material and ideal interests that they have. Hence, we can say that differences in attitudes and value are mostly vary through class, religions, language, and more. In terms of Germany, we can see that political attitude vary across history of late unifications, in which those who live in East experience the communist and authoritarian system, and those who are in the West experience democracy during the Cold War era. Whereas in Japan, we can see that differences in political attitudes and value mostly vary through class, gender, and ages. For the political participations, most Japanese citizens do not participate in politics. While political attitudes in other countries, such as Germany, have fluctuated corresponding to social, political, and economic climates of the times, in Japan, a consistently negative view of politics has persisted since the late 1960s. While many Japanese citizens participate in specific political acts, such as signing candidate support cards, attending political rallies, they largely do not view this activity as political participation. Thus, we can say that the political culture of Japan is a civic culture in which people are aware of the government and what it does, but do not participate much. Also, hierarchy governs most social relationships in Japan, and Japanese are most comfortable in settings where their social standing in relation to that of others is clear. Inferior yield to their superior authority, and superior are obliged to care of their subordinate needs. Thus, not many citizens in Japan are interested in politics. Moreover, in Japan, people were taught that group value comes first, not individual value. Therefore, they are willing to accept hard work, poor living condition, and limited personal liberty and rights to support a group. For example, promotion in firm or ministry or political is more often based on seniority and personal like patron-client relationship than on merit. With the information we provided earlier, Japan emphasizes the power of government rather than the citizen right and duty. So individual freedom and social equality equality remained less important than being accepted by the group. And for the analysis of Germany and political participations, we can see that political participations in Germany and Japan are quite different. For instance, in Germany, the citizens perceive a lot of freedom of civil liberty, and government also try to respond to citizen needs. Whereas in Japan, the citizen rights are restricted, but not because the government did not respond to citizen need nor provide limited right to a citizen, but also the citizen themselves, which they were not interested in politics, and they did not view casting vote or signing petition as political participations. And that's it for my part. I would like to invite Thierry to finish the whole presentations. Thank you.
Thank you for the floor. So this is the final section of the content. Is we are going to answer the questions of what makes democracy work. So democracy works when there is both participation from government and citizens by strengthening the civic engagement, promoting citizens' political participation, and building inclusive democratic institutions. So in the democratic regime, elections are competitive, free and fair, as well as inclusive, where everyone has the chance to be participating in the voting system. So next point would be the recommendations of future direction for Germany. First of all, the government and parties should focus more on micro factors that contribute to society due to the fact that people are more reliant on the government to assist the country. People are more keen on the government to help them, especially in the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, instead of trying to disagree with one another. And the second point would be people should also have a voice or have their voice heard in the government, where people are there to practice democracy through their criticisms and evaluation, so that the governmental operation can be adapted to benefits of all. The next point here is the recommendation for Japan. First of all, Japan should be promoting citizens' political participation. So Japan can do that by motivating citizens to become more involved in various channels of engagement. For instance, if the citizens participate in a government program, they will get incentives such as retirement funds and so on. The second point, Japan should also be building inclusive democratic constitution and institutions. In order to do so, Japan need to abolish their conservative view about hierarchy and start to think about their own potential rights. For instance, the government should stop appointing minister by the personalized patron-client relationship. However, they should instead appoint officials based on the merit by taking an exam to prove that individuals are more potential to deserve to be officials. So here is the list of our reference to our content. And thank you everyone for your attention.